That's right. That's right. I've seen enough.
That is fine.
All right, sir. Nobody else is here? You saved it for me?
I say, I'm taking it. You put it in there, you already said it. You already said it.
This one, this one I actually put that in. It was really cool. That was on my high school class.
That is great.
I had my daughter yesterday, so I know the feeling.
It was a fly back yesterday. And I actually got to spend time with her.
Morning.
How are you? We're both like
What?
being paid more.
How's
your back?
Much better.
I didn't know we were going to be there like Scary's.
You know what? They do it sometimes.
That's what it took.
The pain might be there, but you might not feel it.
I needed it to feel alive.
I'm not sure he and I have ever met. Like, Seth and I have known each other for like 2 decades. But never.
It's all good.
Well, you were sitting in the committee, so
Ned doesn't
you guys litigation and stuff.
Well, know that it's still a process. Go slow.
He's been around for decades too. I'm sure you don't know. You haven't met him. You know of him, obviously.
Yeah.
We're in that. Yeah, you can move it down.
I'm just good. You can sense it. I will tell you. I like to much like the beginning. He interviewed me and I was like, dude, this is what you're supposed to be asking. Like, it's you know, it's like, I'm trying to distract you.
Hey, good morning. I'm great, Sue. She's on her way. She's stuck in the letter. She's taking
I am doing fine. How are you? I'm good.
Yeah, well,
Because I'll be here, and I know because I talked to her yesterday. So that should be it. And and then I told her, because I usually put this in the side chair, this in the side. Like, how may stay on? Yeah. So I may or may not get to the kiddo. She's like, it's okay. And I'm like, well, I'll try and get to her. That's Stone Cross.
Oh, you mean, okay.
yeah.
That was at 11. Just depends on you.
Yeah, I still probably. Still, that's why I said I still probably. I don't know when we're talking.
Yeah, we were not
Oh,
this.
yeah. Yeah, one had like 15 hours.
No, the speakers are not.
Oh, yeah.
See if that comes up. Yeah.
That water crisis at that big time.
How are you? Good, good.
I was thinking about my Mitzi.
Yeah. You were what?
Mitzi is my mother.
Every time I look at your foot, I think of Izzo, his scream of
I don't think so. You have opinions, but I'd rather talk to somebody who I think Gabe recognizes Gabe.
good ball players.
Oh, yeah.
Who wants to take it?
That's why Mitzi. I mean,
You gotta
we could have the most dynamic conversations.
right.
Still there today.
Morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started with the full agenda. Somebody give me some good news. Well, anyway, give me some good news.
I'm here.
Hey, humble, right?
Here. How did you get up this morning?
Right.
Listen to home this
Good news.
afternoon?
What'd you say?
Listen to town home this afternoon?
John, how would you say the market is right now? What would you say?
How is the market?
Right now?
Man in the room.
I don't know, I'm a bit perplexed right now. A lot of stuff going on in the commissions, people gotta wrap their heads around, the interest rates have dropped. I haven't really seen a pickup in activity, but I think that might be, as the school's in session now and the tapers off a little bit maybe at that point. I don't know, we'll see.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? This is the quietest we've ever been. A bunch of realtors that are
Maybe an
quiet.
election coming has people kind of
Election
waiting.
coming, okay.
Yeah.
All right, it could be that also. Yes, sir, Rob.
So, Jim, back in the day, you know, when they rode a horse and everything to go show houses and everything, he said that he started in, what was the number
Hold
one?
on a second. Call the bank, I'll take that deal. If you get Rob, I'll get somebody else.
Even back then, you said, how did you build your business?
Same way I would do it, that's just, one person at a time.
Open houses.
Open houses, yep.
So, just to encourage some of you, I did open houses last 2 weeks, and on a listing that's been for 92 days when I started doing the open houses. And I picked up $3 million worth of business. So, I encourage you, there's plenty of opportunities for open houses. And that's one of the best things about being in this office. We have the most listings, and do it.
And Rob, I agree with you, but I've been saying for a year, do open houses, that's the law right now, so, we gotta do open houses, they're great for you. All right, guys, we're gonna pause for a minute. Kathy, come up here. Who uses Copy MC in this room? Well, this lady's gonna tell you about Copy MC. Come on, Kathy, she's with Keller Williams in Woodstock.
I am, and I'll be very brief, I promise. I have been an agent with Keller Williams for almost 19 years. I'm in the Woodstock office. So I am running for the board of directors at Copy MC. I have volunteered there for 19 years. And I decided that I love that company and I want to see what I can do to help it. And there's never been a realtor on that board. So I'm asking for people who are realtors, if you have Copy MC or you know people who have Copy MC, to vote. There are several ways to vote. One is online. The other is you got a paper ballot in the mail, and the other is you can go to the annual meeting if you want to, but people pretty much don't. So I would ask you to go ahead and vote and just tell people about the election. Most people don't even know they can vote for their directors. So I'm gonna leave you with a little piece of propaganda, and that's all I needed to say. If there are
Any questions, you all?
Do you have a Facebook page or anything
I
that
do.
you do with it? Okay. It's on there?
It's on
Okay,
here.
sweet. I'll share it with
And
my
I'll
neighborhood.
just pass these out, if that's okay.
Any campaign promises that we might be interested in?
Campaign promises? Campaign.
Oh, I can give you lots of campaign.
Chicken in every pie.
What would you like?
You better know.
I would really appreciate those votes. It would help if I could get the grassroots effort with the realtors.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, can we thank her for doing this for us, guys?
Jim,
Yes, ma'am,
I'm
what?
vouching for Kathy. I love Kathy. She and I go back a while back.
Tell them more, how you
She's an
know her?
amazing woman. She has great values. She's an awesome real estate agent. She's in a mastermind with me in Woodstock. She's fantastic.
Thanks. Very, very nice. Okay, all right, guys, let us move on. Our partner, Cheryl, give us some good news. Don't give us bad news, Cheryl.
I posted out this morning, next month, which was like in a few days. Next month's class is gonna be about inspection, due diligence, conditions of property, all that other fun stuff. So I posted out something asking for questions, fun stories. I've already got a comment today, from somebody, so, and I'm here to listen to Ned like everybody, right?
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah,
So I asked a dumb question yesterday, which there are no dumb questions.
right?
So when other agents say, hey, just put it in your offer, right, the compensation. I said to Sherry, I said, are we gonna know what steps to use? She's like, you dummy, just use the form. So,
Right.
I don't know if other people understand that, so the form is basically just.
It is, and if
The
you've heard any of
529.
Seth's classes, he said, don't even use the GAR steps, go ahead and use the broker compensation form. There is on my Facebook group, and I'll share it inside of y'all's Facebook group, cause in open Facebook, you can only post images, but in our Facebook groups, you can upload actual documents. I have a 3-page, one is like a little chart of this is the least amount I think you can get away with document-wise, when to use it, when not to use it kind of stuff. And then the other is like an explanation of each form, what its intended use was for, and then how we're actually seeing it used in practice. But it's like a very quick little cheat sheet for what to include and when to include it. Because you all are fighting against each other right now as to what documents, who needs to sign it, like all of that has been like a lot of headbutting.
But we're all
between
legal
agents.
experts.
Well, and everyone's trying to do the best they can, and some people attended classes, some people didn't attend any. And there are changes we need to make into the forms to make them better. The whole like whether the seller has to sign instructions to closing attorney, whether the seller has to sign the pre-showing documents. It says if the seller is paying, but one of the things that agents never thought about in years and years of practice is, am I paying the buyer's agent or am I only paying my agent? And that agent is paying the buyer's agent. So it's that failure to understand the difference between direct compensation and cooperative compensation where it's flowing through. So we're all learning.
You've got an upcoming CE class about the new contracts and stuff. Or is that was yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Good. I didn't go there, but I went to the one you did a month or so, was that the same CE thing?
The one that I did yesterday was because August is our back to basics, back to school,
Yep.
whatever. And so it's an in-depth contracts class, but I also went in-depth for about an hour on just the brokerage exhibits. The Facebook group that we have, that if you attended any of our classes, you got invited to, we'll probably rename it at some point. Right now, it's called like the mid-year contracts with Cheryl King or something like that. That has a recording of the Zoom class on just the mid-year changes. So, if you don't know how to get access to that, just me or Carrie, and we'll make it happen, but the recording for that mid-year class is in there, so.
Cheryl, what do you think the chances are that in about 9 months, we'll figure all this out and the forms committee will come up with a new form, it'll probably be the one that's easiest to use?
Without giving away anything that's protected by confidentiality, I do feel like I think I've been pretty clear that I think we have at least one form too many. And that I do think that we probably will consolidate those down because we were working without knowing exactly what the settlement was gonna say. So that's working with both hands tied behind your back. So we didn't have a lot of time and we were piecemeal making changes to some of our forms instead of just taking them from the very beginning. And I sit on both the brokerage agreement subcommittee and the exhibit subcommittee, so between those two, I think we'll be figuring it out.
I think so too. So that's 9 months, stay tuned, right?
Well, less than 9 months, if you think about it, so this is August, we only have one more forms committee meeting before all of the forms for January 1 have to be finalized. The October meeting is like a fix your typos meeting, and then they have to go vote, so one more meeting and we're done.
Cool, great. Right, thank you,
Thank you
Cheryl.
guys.
Right, thank you, man. Give our hands out for Cheryl. All right, let me turn on the mic.
Yes, one thing I want, this is gonna be a great day.
A lot going on over here.
Sabotaging my friend back in the corner.
It's his row.
Okay.
Going
Oh, no, that's good. I mean, I thought it was gonna be a rough day just because Dennis was here, but anyway. I'm Reed Clark, I'm with Silverton Mortgage. There's a lot of y'all in here that I don't know. I was looking around the room, a lot of faces that I think people that I don't know, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. Most important thing is Heather's birthday was Sunday. So Danielle's not here, she's sick. She's got whatever that is that's going around. I mean, there's a lot of it. A few things that I wanted to, a couple of things I wanted to look at today. I can customize a flyer for you guys. If you've got a client that's sort of on the fence, you know, I'm sure you don't have anybody that says, I think I want to wait and all that sort of thing. I've got 2 flyers that I can co-brand with you. I'm not sure if you can see this. This is an estimate of appreciation for a $600,000 purchase in Marietta, 30066. And the annual appreciation is estimated at 3.5, and that's the annual, that's the historical appreciation also. And I'm sure you guys have run these numbers, but in 10 years, we're talking about $245,000 of appreciation. Now, this is at 3.5% appreciation, which I think is, I mean, it's conservative considering what we've been through for the last 10 years, for sure. Because if you'd have bought that house 10 years ago, here, can you imagine? Maybe some of y'all can, what the value would be. Sometimes if you've got the right client that is a numbers person, this is the type of thing that can help move the needle a bit. You have this flyer on your desk, you have 2 on your desk. And I can adjust it too. I can adjust the annual forecast up or down any way you want to. And is there more of that at the bottom? Beside my mug?
Just your mug.
It's just
Well, that's the worst part. That's actually another benefit of the lights having to be down for this, but anyway, we'll go on to the next one. This is a client that says, well, look, you know, I'm paying $1,800 a month, I could probably go to $2,200 a month. And I've got a little bit of savings. Well, this right here tells them exactly what price of house that they could afford. And it's in a visual format. You can see it on your paper. If you guys would like any of these, we can co-brand it to send it to your clients. I know that Liz had an event 2 Sundays ago, and it was for first-time homebuyers. It was folks that had graduated from college over the last few years, and they're beginning to start to think about these things. This is the kind of information that can help them solidify that decision-making process and be ready to do it. And if we can help you in any way, we'd love to. And what am I forgetting? Is there anything? Nothing important? Good? All right. Well, guys, any questions? I know you want to know what interest rates are, right?
Yeah.
About where they were last week. I'm telling you guys, it is.
Where were they last week?
If I were y'all, about where they were the week before.
And we'll
I would say in general, mid to low 6s. You can get into the 5s, especially on a government loan, without paying a lot of points. But y'all, I would just cool my jets and wait and see what happens, because that big precipitous drop that everybody talked about, it has not happened yet. Even yesterday, the bond market, I'm sure Hunter noticed it too, the bond market went the other way yesterday. And it was like, you know, it'll get there when it gets there, right? So, love to help you guys if we can. Appreciate you.
Thank you, buddy.
How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I brought breakfast, donuts, but I did bring fruit to kind of counteract it. Thank you guys for having me. Again, I'm with Residential Inspector of America.
I know some of you use us, we do a good bit of business, with y'all's office, so just thank you for your business. If you don't use us, a couple of things that sets us apart, we do, same day, next day scheduling, so as long as you call us before noon, we'll get out there that day or the very next day. We do same day reports, so we will get the report to you the same day, and then we also do pay and close option, which has been, super popular with a lot of the agents, throughout. So, any questions you guys have about inspections? No?
Do you give any warranty on your inspection?
I'm sorry?
Do you give any warranty on your inspection?
Yes, so we also have a 90-day warranty, a free 90-day warranty, that comes with every full home inspection that you do. So that's also, kind of what sets us apart as well. So we would love to do business with you guys. I put some business cards out there, but my email is whitney@residentialinspector.com if you guys have any questions or I can help y'all with anything at all. Thank y'all.
Let's give her a hand, you all. All right, my 4 C2Ts. Jayla, what's your favorite one today?
My favorite one today is customers always come first. Our clients always come first. It's something through these challenges, as we are facing them, they are also facing these things and they're counting on us. And so it's on us to show up our best every time. And so I would say customers always come first because we need them.
We need them. Without them, we cannot pay the bills. Cool. So I like that one, Darren. Good job. I've been mentioning your command website, guys. This is coming up Wednesday, the 28th, live, right, Kimberly? And guys, you do not want to miss this. Patrick Malden is the best, and I love Kevin. He is incredible. But this is what Patrick is paid to do, is understand command, and the website's on there, and he is really good at explaining it. So it's in person only. Please come. That is this Wednesday, which is tomorrow, August 28th at 11 a.m. You do not want to miss this. He is incredible. And if you want to do this, say, well, I don't know what to do to get started, well, come listen to him. He'll help you with that process. It's smart. There's going to be a great meeting on Thursday, August 29th, 11:30, diversity and inclusion of unconscious bias. You don't know what you don't know, guys, so please come join them on Thursday and just learn about things that you may be doing that you're not even aware of. Buyer presentation and getting the signature. Rob, you want to talk about this?
So this is piggybacking on Michael Cheever's class that he did last week. And it's really going over a full buyer presentation, bringing into light all the new stuff that's out there.
Right.
And more importantly, getting the signature. Because you're not supposed to pass a threshold without having a signature.
All right, guys, we've been doing this for a long time, guys, but you need to get even sharper at this and getting it signed sooner rather than later. All right, who matters? You want to talk about this, Jalen?
Yes, next Thursday from 10:30 to 12, we are going to have a mom's group mastermind. And so if you are a mother that's a full-time realtor, part-time realtor also, we're going to have a panel of Stephanie Can, Taylor Ingram, Amanda Warren, Libby Bramblett, and they are going to be talking about how they balance their business as full-time realtors and full-time mothers. We are going to have a mimosa bar with a light brunch, light refreshments, but it's just going to be a great conversation on how to balance as a mom and as a full-time realtor. And so feel free to join from 10:30 to 12 next Thursday, and we may have a very special guest joining us also, but I'll mention that next week.
Is it Beyonce?
It may be. Let's create the hype.
And if you're a stay-at-home dad, you're welcome to come join us.
There it is, or a stay-at-home
dad. All right, guys. I know we're talking about this awful early, but guys, you want to sign up for this, particularly if your business is not where you want it to be. This guy, Marcus, will be coming and jumping in our meeting pretty soon, guys. But this is going to happen on step one on October 14th, and you want to come to this. It's a free first step. Come, listen to this guy, see if he speaks to you, and you think he can help you finish strong this year, guys. Please put on your calendar. You'll want to do this if you want to finish strong. Lessons learned.
You might hit the light, Joe. You might hit the light. First, I want to say with the knowledge that we have coming around contracts today, this lessons learned isn't going to be about contracts. By a show of hands, who is familiar with the blackout period that's gonna be happening in command from September 1st to September 10th?
No.
Alright, Marlon, so what's gonna be happening between September 5th and September 10th?
Well, I don't know exactly what is happening, but we should not create any opportunities on those days. And we should submit our request or packs before, if we have a closing during that period of time, because otherwise we will have to double input the documents or whatever we have to do. So it is important that if you have a closing, you ask for your pack before and don't submit any opportunities on that day.
Okay,
They're closing out the Winmore system, which is what we have used for many years through KW, to put it to, it's now gonna go to a command system.
yes, so Winmore, the system that Melissa and Noel uses to run our back office, it is going to be going through a blackout period and commissions will be going through command. So what this means, most importantly, if you have a closing that is scheduled by that for September 10th or before, your pay at close needs to be submitted today. By the end of business today, your pay at close needs to be submitted or you will not be paid. I'm gonna say that again. If you have a closing that is closing September 10th or before, your pay at close needs to be submitted today. Winmore is going to be closing out between September 1st and September 10th. Do not create any opportunities in command because you will have to recreate it after September 10th because the data is not going to transfer. And if you have a commission to upload into command, you will not be able to do it between September 1st and September 10th. So if you have any additional questions, Melissa and Noel are going to be downstairs today and they are more than happy to assist you with any of your questions. But know that if you have a current contract and it is closing September 10th or before, the pay at close needs to be submitted today. Everybody, yes.
You said you will not get paid. You will get paid, you just won't get paid till after the 10th.
Yes, you will get paid, yes, sorry about that. Clarity, you will get paid, yes, you will get paid, but it will be after September 10th. Yes, no, that was a very good point. I'm not trying to scare you, I just wanna give you the facts. And so that is something to keep in mind. If you do have a closing coming up in the next 2 weeks, make sure that you are on the same page with Melissa and Noel and Sherry, okay? Awesome, and then, yes, Lily.
And what should we do with the new offers?
With the new ones, Sherry, do you have the answer to that?
I'm under the impression you can still create opportunities, you just can't use the commission tab. So, you have a choice. You can either create the opportunity during that time period, knowing it might disappear and you might have to recreate, or you can just hold on to everything until after the 10th. And on September the 11th, create your opportunities at that point. It'll be your call.
In the email that Jean sent out, if you do create an opportunity between September 1st and September 10th, that data is not going to transfer and you will have to recreate it on September 11th.
What about earnest money?
Sit on, just sit on.
Yes.
Earnest money?
Is there gonna be anything different that we do, or is it all on the back?
It's gonna all go through command. So you're gonna upload it the same, and this is more of a MCA thing, and so you're just gonna upload it in command, and then everything is gonna track through there. But Winmore is the system that Keller Williams has always used, where now they're just integrating it all into one. So when it comes down to uploading documents, that will still all be done. When it comes down to creating opportunities, that will all be the same.
Because I promise you, Melissa's staff, they are on top of this, don't worry about it, I promise you, they're on top of it.
Your commission tab may look slightly different, but not anything major that you can be trained on.
I promise they're on top of it, I promise you.
Yes.
Anything else?
Yes, I have one question. If we're not submitting to the office and you're collecting earnest money, how are we handling that?
Email me the contract, great question, just email me the contract.
All right, perfect, thank you.
If you've got earnest money that needs to be turned in, and we need to verify that you have a binding contract, just email me the binding contract, and we'll use that to verify the earnest money to be deposited.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Can you hit the light?
What you ask?
Can you hit the light? We have a lot of people in the room. Just want to acknowledge any of our first time guests. Do we have any first time guests in the room? Would you mind introducing yourself? I wasn't gonna let you skip by.
My name is Denise Robertson. I am from New Jersey and I just moved here 6 weeks ago, but I'm originally from London, just in case you couldn't guess.
Yes. And she's been a business owner for over 20 years and she's looking to get her real estate license and build a successful real estate business.
Well,
Thank you all.
All right, you all, Ned, are you on?
I am.
Can you turn the volume up? There you are, Ned. I want to turn the. Thank you. Okay, all right, so Ned, welcome.
Thank you.
So I went around yesterday, Ned, and I asked probably about 10 people, most of them are in my top 20%, how it's going, and most of them felt pretty good about, the sky's not falling yet, okay? So would you start off with telling us, like right now, what can we do, what can we not do?
Well, we can try not to get in trouble. We can try not to real estate jail. Look, Jim, I've told you this and I've repeated it probably a million times already. In Georgia, we were so far ahead, and to put a shout out to the Forms Committee for all the good work it's done over the years. We were so far ahead on a lot of this stuff that really the major thing that changes here is just not having co-op commissions in the multiple listing service, which means that salespeople by and large have to do the one thing that a number of folks just seem to hate more than anything in the world. You have to talk to each other early in the transaction just to figure out what any co-op commission is. I mean, fundamentally, that's the major thing that shifts in Georgia. Obviously, there are little bits and pieces that flow along with it, but other than that, yeah, I checked it 24 hours after the rule change went into effect, and it looked to me like deals were still happening.
Okay, Sherry?
So specifically answering your question, what you can't do is you can't put co-op commissions or compensation or reference anything about compensation in a multiple listing service. That's pretty much it from a rule change perspective on how it impacts things. You can put it on your website, you can put it on a billboard, you could tattoo it to your forehead, you could put it on I've seen all kinds of stuff where some people have gone on Facebook and they're like, oh, I'm going to put a key in the lockbox and there's going to be a little tag on the key that says 3%. I've seen somebody who I think was joking and said, I'm never going to list the property unless it's either listed for the last number is going to be like, $500,003 or something like that. But basically you just can't put any reference to compensation in a multiple listing service. And you do have to disclose in writing and have a disclaimer to your buyers before you're going out and showing them touring property, telling them how much you're getting paid or how it's being calculated and who's going to be responsible for it. That's really what it boils down to.
So Ned, I called you because I was confused, and why FMLS was still allowing compensation on their site. And I said, should we just let them go ahead and follow FMLS and let them continue to put on FMLS? And you remember our discussion?
Vaguely, I barely remember yesterday, but
what you said was, how lucky do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line on it is that FMLS is not a board-owned multiple listing service. It's privately owned. It's not subject to any of the rule changes from NAR. It hasn't been sued. It's not been named in any of these claims, and it can do whatever it pleases. And evidently it has decided that it's going to leave the ability to have a co-op commission available. Where that becomes challenging is that, you know, we just don't know. You know, this is all brand new world, brave new world type stuff. There's so much we don't know. And while FMLS certainly is a multiple listing service, it potentially is also categorized as an internet aggregator, and we're not sure exactly 100% what an internet aggregator is, but certainly FMLS seems like it would be one, or any multiple listing service. And there is a rule that changed that says that you're not allowed to upload commission information. You can't basically, and this is not a legal term, but you can't get cute with the system. You can't try to game it in a way that is sort of obvious in terms of trying to get around the rules. So you can't put it in a system that doesn't call itself a multiple listing service, but in function is a multiple listing service. So to me, the risk, I mean, and I can't put a percentage on it, but let's say there's a 99.9% chance that you will never have a problem if you put a co-op commission in an FMLS. I'm not saying that that's the case, but just for pretend, let's say there's only, you know, a 99.9% chance you'll be fine, but on the slight 1/10 of a chance that you end up not being fine, you are functionally about to be bankrupt because you were going to be spending more in litigation costs than, you know, the gross domestic product of some countries. Just not worth it. Let's let the dust settle. Let somebody else take the risk. See if there's going to be a problem down the road. 6 months from now, a year from now, we'll know a lot more. But right now, you know, it is the how lucky do you feel?
Okay, cool. I like that. Sherry?
Hey Ned, this is Sherry. One of the questions I'm getting a lot is, can you explain the pros and cons on the listing agreement, the seller paying the commissions through the brokerage versus the seller paying the commission straight to a co-op broker?
Sure. In terms of when you say, so whether the seller is paying the listing broker and then the listing broker is paying the buyer's broker versus the seller paying the seller's broker and the seller paying the buyer's broker?
Correct. Can you give us the pros and cons to either way?
Sure. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference in most scenarios. In most cases, I don't know that it really much matters. There are a lot of brokerages that are taking the position of, we're just going to straight up decouple any commission sharing. We're just not going to be in the business of offering commissions ourselves to buyers brokers just because it's one more headache for us, I guess. And so we're just going to leave that as a seller's decision. The one area that I have seen this where it has not really legal significance to me, but more of a practical significance, is a question of, well, what happens if we have an unrepresented buyer? We've got somebody who, it's our listing and the buyer comes in off of our sign or shows up in an open house. They're not working with another broker. And we want to, you know, we're going to do a lot more work in that case than we would if they were represented by another broker or another agent. And so our deal with our seller is that our commission is going to be 6%. But if there is an unrepresented buyer, we're going to charge 5% total. We're not going to cut it in half. We're going to charge, we're still going to get paid more than we would otherwise. Our commission's 6%, but we're sharing half of it with a buyer's broker. But if there's no buyer broker, our commission's only going to go down to 5%. So if that, in that scenario, it's more of a sales issue of, if you go to a seller and you say, dear Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's our agreement and our commission, we're going to have the commission paid to us, and it's going to be 3%. And seller, you are also going to pay a 3% commission to a buyer's broker. That's what we're suggesting, and seller, we want you to go along with that. But seller, in the event that there's no buyer's broker, and if it's just us, then we're going to upcharge you from 3% to 5% because we're going to be doing so much more work on behalf of the buyer. That's just kind of a hard sell, having to explain to the seller that, well, normally you're just paying our side of it 3%, but if there's no other broker involved, then you're paying us more. It just, a lot of sellers, I think, would say, well, don't find the buyer, let somebody else find the buyer. sales perspective, it may be easier in that scenario to say our commission is 6% on the list side. We will share 3% of that we will share half of that, the total 3% with the buyer's broker. But if there is no buyer's broker, our commission goes down from 6% to 5%. So it's a reduction. It all nets out the same. It's just a question of how you're able to sell it to a seller.
So why do you think some brokerages are going the route of insisting that their agents in their listing agreements that the seller's paying the co-op broker directly? Is it to protect themselves from something, or?
I don't know exactly the rationale that they have there. My speculation is that it's easier in the sense of if you're, there's a perception that it's easier of, oh, well, that's just the seller's responsibility. We don't have to worry about it. Maybe there's a concern about, well, we're not going to end up in a fee arbitration with the other broker over any issue because we haven't agreed to pay anything. So it'll just be a buyer broker versus seller issue, and it leaves us out. I'm not sure what the rationale is. That's just my speculation.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, guys, do you have a question in the room here? Please hold your hand up, and Dennis, I'll start with you.
Ned, my name's Dennis O'Reilly. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I'm not asking you to endorse anything. I wouldn't expect you to, and I know you won't. But recently there was Sean Rawls came out with a Fee Central, kind of, it's not an app, but something, and does that comply, in your opinion, with what's out there, with the rules?
I believe it does, and full transparency, I have discussed that system with Sean, so I'm a little bit familiar with it. And as I told him, and as I've told everybody, there are no guarantees on any of this stuff because it is brave new world, and we don't know what we don't know. But what is here's what we do know. We do know that you can't list co-op commissions or compensation in a multiple listing service. We also know that you're not allowed to upload information to an internet aggregator, whatever that is. It's not defined. But my view of it is that you can't, is what I mentioned before, you're not allowed to, what in quotes, get cute with the system. You can't create your own multiple listing service, call it something else, but you can still go on there and pull up properties based on the number of bedrooms and the location and compare and contrast all the information. My understanding about the system Sean came up, and I think there are several others out there nationally. My understanding is that it works where you have to type in a specific street address. So you have to have already identified the property and type in a specific address. If the listing agent has uploaded the information into the system, including compensation, then that'll be there and you can find it. If they haven't, then you won't be able to. What we do know in the NAR settlement is that it is absolutely permissible for you as the listing agent or listing broker to include on your own website and your own social media commission information about your specific listing. So if you're a buyer's broker, and you find someone who's interested in 123 Smith Street, and it's listed by, Realty X, whoever, you can go to Realty X's website, and if they have on their website under that listing information about it that includes a co-op commission, that's perfectly fine. So what fundamentally is the difference between doing that or going to some other website where you have to do the exact same thing? You can only find the information by typing in the same request. Show me information for 123 Smith Street. That's what this does. So to me, it seems like it passes muster. That's my impression of it.
Thank you.
Paige, you're next.
I'm Paige Morgan. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
Can go back to Sherry's question with regards to how you feel it is best to either pay for the seller to pay the buyer agent or for the seller to pay a co-op agent through us. If I can clarify, you really have no opinion on that, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it sort of nets out. I mean, it obviously nets out the same. The only thing I can think of that, other than that one scenario where you have an unrepresented buyer. The only other thing I can think of is just from an administrative standpoint. Maybe it's perceived, depending on how a broker is running its back room, it may be easier if the commission is being paid directly by the seller to the buyer's broker. And no one's told me this is just my own speculation, that a broker may make the decision of, I've gotten dragged in front of GAR for fee arbitration on a couple cases where we've had disputes with buyers brokers over what the commission sharing arrangement is, and I want to avoid that in the future. So I'm just going to have all of our sellers agree to pay whatever they agree to pay to the buyer's broker, and I'm not sharing anything, so I don't have to worry about being dragged into a fee arbitration potentially down there.
With regards to the lawsuit, it has nothing, or with our new regulations, it has nothing to do with.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it has, there's nothing that, now, for clarity, the Department of Justice is still floating around there doing Lord knows what. It's the old Ron Reagan statement of there are a few things scarier than hearing we're from the federal government and we're here to help. And the DOJ is still floating around out there. And my belief is that in the DOJ's view of the world, there will never be compensation from listing brokers to buyers brokers. I don't think there's any way in the world they can enforce that, but I think that's what they, in the back of their minds, are trying to angle for somehow. So maybe that plays into it to some degree. But as far as the settlement itself is concerned, there is nothing that prohibits sellers or sellers brokers from sharing compensation with buyers brokers. It just can't be done through a multiple listing service.
Thank you. My next question involves the use of the buyer brokerage agreement. And I agree with you that we are light years ahead. I love saying that about the state of Georgia whenever I can. But how is this going to affect simple sign calls or internet leads that come in where there are members of the general public who want to see our listings? And number two, a second part of that question is, how are we to handle members of the general public who attend our open houses?
Good questions. So the way this works is that it's only, and part of this is there's an overlay between, the settlement was on a national level, and the language that was crafted was carefully crafted by NAR, but it's still hard to create language that exactly dovetails with typical language that's used across all 50 states. So the language in the settlement agreement says that you're supposed to have the document providing the commission information to a buyer who you are, quote, working with before you go tour properties. Now, oftentimes, and I'll do this myself, I'll say something about, oh, well, you have the listing and you are working with the buyer as a customer, but it's not the same thing. So in this instance, if somebody's calling off of your sign, they're seeing your internet, they're calling about your listing, they're stopping by your open house, you don't need to get anything signed by them. They're not being asked to pay anything. But so at that point, you just press forward, you're fine. When it gets to the stage where they come by the open house, they see it, and you're chatting them up, and they say, hey, this isn't quite the right house for us, but we're interested in seeing others. Could you go show us other properties? Then that's when you need to get it signed.
And we can treat internet leads the exact same way?
Yeah, if they're calling on your listing, then it's not an issue. But as soon as they're like, hey, can you show us other stuff? Then that's before you go tour those other properties.
And someone asked me yesterday, where did 2 clicks come from?
Thin air, as best as I can tell. So NAR, and I think I know where it's coming from, but it's just a guess on my part. There's nothing in the settlement agreement that talks about 2 clicks or anything like that, or even mentions the word click. All there is a prohibition on putting compensation information in the multiple listing service. NAR has taken the position that, hey, if you have a link in a multiple listing service that leads back to something to do with compensation, that there needs to be at least 2 clicks in order to make it safe. So if you put in a website in the multiple listing service, and if you click that website and it takes you directly to a page that says, I'm offering a 3% buyer's commission on this one, NAR is saying you can't do that because that's functionally the same thing as mentioning compensation in the multiple listing service, because it's just a click and and it takes you to that information. Instead, the link that you click on has to take you to some sort of a landing page, typically like your home page. And on your home page, there will be an additional link that you can click that will take you to specific compensation information for that property. And that's what is meant by 2 clicks. And as far as I can tell, it's just something that NAR has said, this is what you need to do in order to maintain, I guess, the spirit, if not the letter, of the settlement agreement.
And you agree with that?
It's, again, we're in this brave new world, but it's one where, you know, if you step off the curb, you may never get hit, but if you do, it's going to be a Mack truck. So, you know, belt and suspenders, folks, just don't press the edges.
But you're unable to click in multiple listing.
So I don't know how, I don't know if there is something in the multiple listing service that disables hyperlinks. If you're not able to click on it, then you could just have a copy and paste scenario. But what you're not supposed to be able to do is click on something or have a link to something in the multiple listing service that directly takes you to a compensation page.
Marlene?
Yes, so I just want to clarify the vocabulary. During the weekend, so I had these buyers. I was calling to the listings to find out about the compensation, and I called one, and the listing agent sent me a text saying that the seller will pay. She said the seller is not paying broker compensation. The seller will pay concessions to the buyer so they can pay you compensation, and include that in your stipulation section 3, and specify that is the X amount for closing costs and X amount for loan. So I called Sherry to clarify how was it going to work, and she asked me to call the loan officer to make sure that we didn't violate anything about the loan, you know, the rule of the loan for my client. And I had to explain this to my client, and my client then got really confused, saying, okay, so in this case, who is paying your commission? So at the end, it's me or it's them? So I just didn't know, because it was going to be in the closing cost, but I couldn't explain him who really was going to pay. And she said, at the end, the forms, who is going to sign, me or them? I don't know. So we skipped the house all together. So if you can just clarify that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So,
Next.
you know, there are a lot of things.
Compensation, but they are paying concessions.
Right. So, I mean, a concession is a generic term. It just means, you know, the seller is providing cash to the buyer to use for whatever. Where it gets challenging potentially, because you got these layers, you've got Georgia law, you've got the NAR rules, and you have lender rules. And lenders have rules, you know, generally as a lender, they don't want to loan money to somebody that isn't secured by dirt and bricks and sticks, right? So a lot of lenders, and with VA in particular, they've got a straight out rule, but generally lenders aren't lending money to be used to pay commissions, because you can't, you know, put a security deed on a commission. So some of this is just tied up in how people are wording things, and there's probably a fair amount of confusion out there. Like, for example, in the scenario you just gave, I don't know why a seller would care one way or another what their concession is being used for. You know, if you are a seller and you're saying, hey, I will give the buyer $10,000 to use to whatever they want to, in the transaction, what do they really care whether it's being used to pay the buyer's broker, being used to pay for the closing attorney, being used to pay for their title, whatever their cost is? What does the seller care? So it sounds to me like in that scenario, there was probably just some confusion in terms of the listing agent sort of understanding what was going on. There is some language in the NAR settlement that says that while you can't mention compensation to the buyer's broker in in an MLS, you can reference generically concessions that the seller will pay for. So my guess is that the listing agent maybe had heard something about that and decided that was safe, so they just weren't going to call it commissions. But you can, for example, today, you can go into whether it's FMLS, Georgia MLS, or any other multi service, and you can include in there a statement that says seller will pay, $10,000 in concessions. You just can't tie it to commissions.
All right.
Yes, sir. Clark.
So, Ned, Clark Davey here. What about if, you find listing agents who are unwilling to give you the information about the compensation based on some kind of strategy to not weaken the negotiation position of their seller?
Yep.
How would you approach that?
Well, you proceed as if there is no compensation being offered, because none is. Whether the seller has pre-authorized it or not, they're not telling you about it right now. So that's where you tell your buyer, who I'm sure you have already had this conversation about, hey, here's what's going on with commissions and compensation. And you say to them, buyer, make your offer according. They are not pre-offering any commission payment. So buyer, either you need to add that in as a special stipulation to your offer, or buyer, you need to be prepared to pay me my commission.
So what would the stipulation be?
With a you could either use the 259 form, or you could use the commission that's in the GR forms that essentially says that the seller agrees to pay buyer's broker a commission of, fill in the blank here.
All right, so Ned, clear something up for me, 'cause for the longest time on the grievance committee, they would bring things to us, they would say, well, they tried to get me to renegotiate my commission, I'm a listing agent, and they can't do that, that's an unfair practice. We took commissions out of the contract, now we're putting them back in again and saying you can go in there and put a commission in. What's changed?
So nothing has changed. It's just a slight nuance that makes all the difference in the world. It is perfectly fine to ask a seller to pay a buyer's broker's commission. That's not a problem. What you can't do is ask the listing broker to take less or attempt to renegotiate the amount of commission that the seller has agreed to pay the listing broker. That's what's prohibited.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ms. Sherry.
All right, here's a question I get quite a bit. The listing agent is not providing the pre-showing compensation. They just sent a text to the buyer's agent saying the seller's offering 3% via text. Can the listing agent be held to that text message?
Probably not from a legal standpoint, possibly from an ethics standpoint. If they in fact know, if they're lying, ethics panel would probably have an issue with that. GREC may have an issue with it, but if they're just, if in fact if they're lying, but them saying, oh, here's what the seller is offering, that in most cases is going to be their understanding. I would confirm that in either an agreement, either the 520, the 258, if you're confirming that before the showing, or if it's going to be after viewing the property as part of an offer, then you're just going to want to move that into a 259 so that it's clear that it's part of the contract. You know, the purchase and sale agreement has an entire agreement clause in it that essentially says, hey, whatever's come before this is gone. It doesn't exist, it's in the shredder. So that communication between you and the listing agent, unless that is incorporated into the purchase contract, is gone once everyone has signed the purchase contract.
Good, thank you.
Who else has a question out here? Oh, this is street crew. Y'all keep me this quiet.
There's questions online.
All right, Paige, she has another question.
Referencing the 258, with the date that has to go in that, if it is not signed by the seller because the commission is being paid through the, listing broker,
Right.
and we have a certain number of days that we have put in the pre-showing compensation agreement, and the compensation agreement between the listing broker and the seller changes, which one prevails?
What I would do is if you have, so if I understand the scenario correctly, we've got a 258, we've got an agreement signed prior to showing that says, hey, here's the commission, here's who's paying, either the listing broker or the seller is paying the buyer's broker a commission of X%. And somewhere between that and the contract signing, there's been a change where that commission is going up or going down or is being modified some way. I would reflect, you'd want to reflect that change in the purchase contract itself, and then that will control.
Did that answer your question?
No.
Answer your question. What's your question, Paige?
I thought it was whatever it was at the time of showing,
That's
whatever was advertised.
that's an ethics rule that was tied to comp being in the MLS.
Right.
Oh, I see. This is like where you're changing the commission.
On the listing agreement changes, but the pre-showing compensation has not been updated, and that's what the buyer agent has in their hands.
Yeah, then that's going to control unless there's been something communicated between the parties prior to then. It's no different than what happened in the old days of, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, when somebody shows the property because, there's, in MLS, it says there's a 3% co-op commission offered. You go out and show the property, and, the next day, without your knowledge, the listing agent changes the information in the multiple listing service. Then you submit the offer, and it becomes a question of, well, did they notify you? Did they tell you before that offer was submitted? Oh, hey, we are changing that. We've changed the commission. Here, it's even stronger that the agreement controls, because you have this agreement that's signed, and until they modify it or change it, it's going to control.
And when you say disagreement, you're referring to the pre-showing compensation?
The pre-showing compensation, yeah.
And what if you do not know who has received the pre-showing compensation? If it's being sent out by a third party, and you're not aware of who has received this signed document with your signature on it, saying that you will pay that.
Yep.
Call that SOL.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
probably about the best you could do at that point would be, and it's not going to be a perfect solution, but, it would certainly, you'd want to change the form. You'd probably want to have something on your own website that references, hey, there's been a change in the compensation being offered. Maybe put something in the property itself. If you've got copies of if you're leaving copies of that form in the property, make sure that's changed. If you get a call or an inquiry from someone saying, hey, we're going to present an offer, tell them, okay, but just so you know, I'm not sure what form you saw, but it's been modified. Here's the new one. You won't catch them all.
What about the start finish date do you recommend for that form? There's a start date of the agreement, but then there's also a time frame. Should that coincide with the length of the listing? Should it be for the next week? What is there a suggested time there?
I think it's going to vary from transaction to transaction, and here's why. In a perfect world, I would probably have it coincide with the time period of the listing. But I know what's going to happen is that just like when you have a seller who's insisting that you list the property for $100,000 more than you know it's worth, right? And you decide, okay, I'll take your listing, seller. Normally, it's been a slow week, so I'll take your listing, but you're priced pie in the sky. You're never going to get that. I'll take your listing under one condition. We're going to have an agreement right now that in 2 weeks, if we haven't had any showings and don't have any offers, you and I, seller, are going to sit down and we're going to do a price reduction. And you may have the same thing going on, and probably will at some point, where the seller says, I'm not going to offer a buyer's broker compensation, or I'm only going to offer him 0.5%. And you say to them, okay, seller, it's your choice, but you need to understand that, that may deter buyers from coming to look at your property. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, but, we'll see how it goes. But I want to have an understanding with you, seller, that if we don't have an agreement, if we don't have a offer coming in within the next 2 weeks, you and I are going to sit down and talk about increasing the amount of compensation you're offering to a buyer's broker. And so in that scenario, maybe you want to put a 2-week time period in there, since it may change.
Can I piggyback
Thank
off
you.
that? It's John Ellinger. Ned, nice to see you again.
Hey there, how you doing?
Doing good, thanks. Just some verbiage that comes to mind for me on that, if I'm sitting in that listing presentation, I'm a strong advocate to my sellers of getting it right first, because you get that initial, it goes out within X number of minutes to all buyers that are out there. Well, now since compensation is not part of it, if you can't put it in the system anymore, that won't trigger it going back out to new people again that you made a change, like what happens with the price
Right.
change. You lose, if I'm sitting with they say, well, let's give it 2 weeks, I'm gonna strongly advocate they don't do that. And really what matters is the bottom line net, like you touched on earlier. Who cares if you pay 10 grand or you call it compensation, or you call it concessions or whatever, it's still the same bottom line. So I would advocate everybody in here to be strong on that, to get in there from the beginning, because you lose that momentum of that first, notice of the listing going on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, and for clarity, I was suggesting it as just an example of what might cause you not to do it, but yeah, you're spot on correct. If you want to get it priced right, and you want to get all the other terms right the first time.
And maybe something to consider is if you're on that listing appointment, you're trying to get the listing, but the seller is wishy-washy, and you're talking about, okay, what might happen 2 weeks down the road, maybe you don't do the pre-showing compensation at that time, because you know there could be changes 2 weeks down the road, and you hold off on doing the pre-showing compensation, if at all.
Or
Yep.
a great way to do it is to don't put the listing, the length of the listing in the number of days, put 2 days in there.
Yeah, and then it expires.
Then it expires, and it encourages an offer. This is what we're offering for the next 2 days. So it would encourage an offer, and it takes away my signature on something that may not be the same in the future.
That's true too.
I like that, yeah.
So all which shows, just demonstrates why there isn't a single perfect answer to that question. It's just going to vary depending on the circumstances.
So then, would the seller be okay then if they said, okay, I'll take your price at $100,000 off my list price, but I'm only gonna pay the agents 4%, I want that in the contract. Can the seller do that?
Yeah, I mean, the seller can always agree, and I think I'll be surprised if we don't see deals where, the price changes based upon, it's nothing different than, if it nets out the same to the seller, like, oh, sure, I'll take less for the property, but I'm not going to give any concessions. I'm going to reduce the price by the amount of concessions I would have paid, or some degree of that, and that happens all the time.
Sorry, guys, other questions? This is your chance. Okay,
Hello?
Hello, yeah.
Hi, it's Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Hey, I do have a question. I came across this the other day. A pre-showing compensation form was provided up front, showing that the listing agent was receiving 6% from the seller, and then she was paying 3% to the buyer broker. And then in the special stipulations section, it says all offers shall be presented with a broker compensation form. So my question is, by submitting that, putting that special stipulation, is it now back for renegotiation? Is that a tactic, or does it, and submitting that, does it completely void the pre-compensation or pre-showing compensation?
I have no idea why you would do that as part of your putting that form out there. It's basic because, you know, what's supposed to happen is if you have the pre-showing form signed, then you don't need to use the 529, the 259. But, you know, in order to comply with that, if they're saying, hey, we are offering a 3% commission from the listing broker to the buyer's broker, provided that you submit an offer that has a 259 on it, then I would, in order to accept that offer, I would provide a 259 that basically just mirrors exactly what is in the pre-showing form.
Okay. And that's what we did, but we were just curious if that, if now they can change that, if they can basically renegotiate the commission.
Technically, no, except, you know, the seller can just refuse to accept your offer.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I had a question. Now, this is Angela Presley. Piggybacking off of that, I was under the impression that pre-showing compensation was before the offer was written. And then once the offer was written, we need to have the broker compensation or instructions to closing attorney.
So it's sort of the pre-showing compensation form is just that, it's for before you've shown the property. If you look at the top of 259, it says only to be used if there is no other agreement between parties as far as, I don't have it memorized, but at the top, it indicates that it's not to be, it doesn't need to be used or isn't to be used when there's already an agreement between the parties as to the compensation. There's nothing that says you can't use it, it's just not necessary.
And just to clarify, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, using the pre-showing, you can skip straight to the instructions of closing attorney. And if you don't have a pre-showing, then use the broker compensation exhibit, and then the instructions of closing attorney is not necessary in most cases.
Yeah, I've got the chart, but I think where the questions come up of you've got to submit the offer is people thinking that the 259 is necessary in all circumstances. And my opinion has been less is more, because when you add to that people not understanding cooperative versus direct compensation, when you mix up all the forms together in a blender, you end up double charging the seller on the buyer side of the transaction, quite frankly, is what we're seeing. So I've seen more than one file already where you have a document that says that the seller's broker is gonna pay $4,000 to the buyer's agent. Then they add the broker compensation and they say the seller is gonna pay the buyer's broker $4,000. Well, now the buyer's broker is getting $8,000. So I've got the chart out there. I think that, but you're gonna be dealing with agents who think that broker compensation form needs to be in every contract, and that's why they're putting that in their listing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you look at the top of the form, I pulled it up, it says this agreement should not be used if the broker's compensation and the party or broker paying it have already been agreed to in a separate written agreement and is not being modified. So if you just look at the top of the 259, it tells you when you need it and don't need it. But yeah, we'll still get folks that use both just because they just don't know.
What about the situation where we have?
All right, Paige, your turn.
what about the situation where we have that a buyer brokerage agreement between buyer and buyer broker is decided at 2%? And the seller is offering 3%. And it's my understanding that the buyer broker cannot be compensated more than what they have agreed to be compensated with the buyer.
Correct.
Buyer.
So what you want to do in that scenario, first, hopefully you have filled out the buyer brokerage agreement. There is language in there that says, essentially at the top part, that says that the buyer is paying up to, is going to pay a compensation of blank percent. So in your scenario, you're putting in 2%. The section below that says that if the seller or listing broker is offering to pay blank percent, that the buyer approves that.
Yeah.
So in this case, you would fill it out with 2% being paid by the buyer, but you would put 3% as being approved if it's being paid by the seller or the listing broker. So your buyer is agreeing in advance that, hey, I'm only paying you 2%, but if you can get 3 out of the seller or out of the listing broker, I'm good with that.
So it's only if for some reason someone would put 0 in there.
So yeah, I mean, if you've filled it out and you put in 2 and 2, so it's 2% being paid by the buyer and the buyer is pre-approving 2% being paid by the listing broker or the seller, and along comes a deal and they're being offered 3%, your buyer has not already pre-approved that, so then you got to go back to your buyer and saying, hey, are you okay with me getting paid more? And if they are, then you're going to modify the form.
You have to modify it. And if there's a bonus involved in it, it has to be modified.
Yeah.
Are you all, other questions? Anybody on Zoom have a question? All right, so Ned, I talked to a couple of frustrated agents the past few days, and they've asked me basically, what is it we can do now? Let's see if I can say this in a better way. What is that we should be doing right now that will pretty well protect us? I understand what you're saying. As long as you do the 2 clicks away, you should be in pretty good shape. You should be. I mean, you lawyers like to file lawsuits. That's the way it is. But at this point, though, is there anything you would say when you're working this, just make sure you do this? Anything that'll keep us mostly out of the eyes of the feds? Is that a logical question?
Yeah, I mean, generically, as I said before, and it's not a legal term, although I'll call it one, is don't get cute with things. Don't try to find code that you put in. I'm getting a ton of questions like, hey, is it okay to put something in the multiple listing service that just says, I love working with buyers brokers? And yeah, that's okay. I mean, I guess the idea there is that you're telegraphing to them of, oh, hey, it's okay. I'm offering, I've arranged it so there's going to be some compensation paid, but it doesn't really say that. That's probably okay, although I don't know why you need it. But where I've seen situations getting cute with it is some people have said, oh, I want to put something in the remarks in the multiple listing service, private or public remarks, that says, I love buyers brokers 3% more than I used to. Like, no.
Well, someone write that down. We like that one. Man, we like that one.
So that kind of stuff, just, I know, and I say this as a recovering realtor, but, so as a group, we are always looking for the angle. We're always trying to find it, but this is just one where, better off to let someone else push the periphery for a while, and let's let the dust settle on this for 6 months or so before we start looking at sort of how far we can push the envelope. Because, no one wants, I always ask for volunteers of people who would like to get arranged to get sued so we can see how far we can push things. I rarely get people who step up to the plate for it. So just, stay on the path until we have a better idea just how broad this path is and where you fall off at the sides. So, that's sort of the main thing. The other thing is just, anyone who does commercial real estate will tell you that this is all just a ho-hum to them, because commercial folks talk about commissions like first thing out of the gate on just about every transaction. And I think in 6 months or a year from now, we'll have folks who look back and say, oh yeah, I vaguely remember how it used to be in the multiple listing service, but everyone's just going to get used to, oh, this is the way it is. So, be thankful that you're in a state like Georgia where the forms and the law are so far advanced. There are plenty of folks, my sister's a broker in Florida and they didn't have buyer brokerage. They didn't have, they're learning all this stuff. They've got a huge steep learning curve. So there are lots of areas in the country where this is a real big deal change to them.
Alright, real quick, Cheryl, in your class yesterday, you had an excellent example on why us as agents need to make sure we understand our compensation forms so that we don't get paid zero at the closing table. Do you mind sharing that story with us just real quick? Because it just goes to the point of knowing how to fill out your forms correctly.
So this was the easy form. This was the instructions to closing attorney, guys. So this one should have been no problem. And it was cooperative compensation apparently. So that wasn't anything new. The first version of the instructions to closing attorney we got had zero, it had nothing in number 1 and had a percentage in number 2. I'm gonna call it $4,000. So, cause that 3 is getting used a lot today. So $4,000, let's say. So what does that say? That says that the seller's broker gets paid 0, but the seller's broker needs to bring $4,000 to closing to pay the buyer's broker. This is signed by both agents. We suggested it might be wrong. It's not my pre-closer's job to get you paid correctly. It really is your job. They don't get paid nearly as much as you guys do. Don't put it on them to make sure that it's right. So we get version number 2. In this version of it, it's still using just number 1 and number 2 on the instructions to closing attorney. It has $4,000 in number 1 and $4,000 in number 2. So, no.
Zero.
The total is what is in number 1, and whatever is in number 2 comes from number 1. So how much did the seller pay in compensation? $4,000. All of it went through the seller's agent and to the buyer's agent. Seller's agent signed that too. Apparently, presumably reviewed a settlement statement 2 days before closing. And sent someone else to be there with her for closing, where the closing attorney went through every line of the settlement statement. Did not ever presume or to say anything. We sent wires. The seller got in a car and drove away. That's the first time anyone asked anything. And the conversation from the actual agent who called from her vacation, to the closing attorney was, well, why would I not be paid? I don't know what your deal is. I don't know if this is your cousin, your family member. I don't know if you're making so much money on their purchase that you're not getting anything on their sale. We already asked you to redo it one time. We really thought you might look at it the second time that you do it and read it. And her response is that she's gonna report the attorney to the bar.
And that scenario is not just as bad as they're getting paid nothing. They actually lose money because they still owe FMLS fees and
And they still have the right to be paid, don't get me wrong, but the money is now in the seller's bank account. So, they do have a brokerage agreement where a seller agreed to pay, but they're gonna have to be going after it.
And that seller has undoubtedly moved to Guam or somewhere for where there's no extradition.
As soon as they got in the car and drove away. I do know what the listing agent was gonna tell the seller is the attorney screwed this up. I absolutely positively would bet my own house on that. But I don't know how many times we have to say, are you sure, are you sure, are you sure? You guys have to really, really make sure you pay attention.
you're this office, Cheryl will see, you may wanna call
Yes,
Sherry.
Thank you.
We're trying, we are trying really hard to catch those mistakes.
I can tell you this much, which is that you might do that once.
Exactly.
And so Ned, and this is gonna ask you for an opinion, but I've been saying for a long time that when discount brokerages came in, I was told that all the other brokers would be going under because they would take over, which did not happen. I was told when the computer came in, that agents would not be necessary anymore because they would do all the stuff for us. That did not happen either. So in a year from now, is this gonna be the same thing to where we're just doing normal business and we'll be used to the new way?
Yeah, I don't see any fundamental change. I have not, at least so far, observed any downward pressure on commissions that was not otherwise coming anyway. Back a million years ago when I was practicing real estate, we didn't have this newfangled thing called the internet or, anything other than like an old, Apple II PC kind of thing, Apple II computer. We had the keys to the kingdom, which was, we got the books. If anyone doesn't know, a book is a thing made out of paper that has pages in it that they print stuff on.
Books in here, hold your hands up.
Tell them about books.
You have to return them under license law if you terminate your brokerage.
The old books came out 2 times a month, and that's where you got all your listings from. And if you weren't a member of the multiple listing service, you didn't get that information and you couldn't go look it up anywhere. And we had the keys to the kingdom, so pretty much everyone was forced to use a broker, and commissions were regularly 7% back then. You come forward and you've got the internet, you've got IDX feeds, you got all this information, and certainly a little before COVID and certainly post-COVID, everyone's got a virtual tour and photos and stuff, and it's just easier for buyers to find property. There's already been downward pressure on commissions based upon that, and I don't see this as changing it at all. I think it's just the same as it was, before the 17th and after the 17th. And I think a year from now we'll look and we'll say, yeah, things are pretty much the same.
Are you all, anything else? Yes, Paige.
I just want to remind everyone that we have focused on FMLS today, and that is not the only service that we have to follow these guidelines with. Georgia multiple listing, and we have people in this office who are members of board-owned multiple listings as well.
All right, any guys, last time, any questions that you're burning in your heart? JO team, be very quiet. Anything that's burning in your heart, like this is the man. Cheryl sitting over, she can answer the question. Anything at all? Sherry, anything else?
Answered all my questions so far.
Cheryl, anything else?
No?
All right, guys, Ned, we appreciate you being with us today.
Pleasure.
Ned, send me the bills. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, you too. Stay safe.
All right, you all, tell me something that you learned today. Tell me something you learned today. What'd you learn? If you say nothing, I'll be very disappointed.
That you are a man of your word. You said I can ask every single question.
All right, yes, right, get it back there, yes, ma'am.
That we can put our compensation on our website.
Okay, right.
On
I
a
like
landing
that.
page.
I like
You don't have
that.
to have 3 clicks.
Say what?
You don't have to have 3 clicks.
I have 2 questions. Who said that? They are. That's what he said. Yes, ma'am.
Know how to fill out your form.
How about read your forms? How about that? Yes, sir.
Learn that it's a slippery slope documenting that you like realtors 3% better. But I want to just take a moment just to say thanks to Jim for providing this value for us today. I know he's very selfless, but Ned is one of the most trusted attorneys in the state of Georgia. And Jim just brought us a hour consultation with no retainer fee or consultation fee going on your monthly bill. This was a very valuable session, so I just want to thank Jim for being able to utilize the
But I tell you what, but if I had to pick between Ned teaching a class and Cheryl teaching a class, I I'm sorry, I pick Cheryl all day long. She makes the classes fun.
He's still on there.
I know, Dan and I have been friends long as most of y'all been in real estate, so I'm trying to get that way. But Cheryl, we love you, we love what you do for us.
Oh, yes.
Anything else at all we need to talk about? Anybody at all we need to do? We have a little more clarity today? What's your clarity today, Dee? What's your clarity today?
Just to not only communicate, but get everything in writing, because I didn't realize like some things can change so fast.
Anything else? Paige, what was your aha for today?
It does not, we do not have to do anything with a buyer brokerage agreement if someone is viewing our listing and we're representing the seller or at an open house. We don't have to have a disclosure or anything signed by someone, a member of the general public, unless we take them from that property to a non-listed property of ours.
I like that. Anybody else? Anything you learned today?
No, Paige, that just like, the light bulb just went off because I heard this the other day, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong. It is okay to, when you host open houses, to have agents outside our brokerage sit in your open houses, or vice versa. There's some extra paperwork that needs to be signed and some extra guidelines you have to go by. But from what I'm understanding with these new changes, if I'm the agent and I'm sitting in the Keller Williams City side, I'm hosting that open house. If the buyers come in, I do have to get the buyers to sign something, correct?
Yeah, the
So
listing
that's
belongs
kind of
to the brokerage.
Right.
So the easiest path of least resistance course of action is to use agents within your own brokerage to host your open houses.
You're saying two things. You're saying office, she's saying brokerage. You're
Well,
saying
we're
city
brokerage.
side, how about if we say signature properties?
Say signature properties in.
Yeah.
Say.
I think that
Not
license law and Greg is gonna look at it by your broker codes. So if you have a separate broker code, you may be a different brokerage. I don't know, I mean, that's gonna be a line that I don't think has been nuanced.
Well, just in the past several weeks, I've had several agents ask, hey, can I get this person to sit in my open house? And they're not a pawn agent. And you can, we don't recommend it, but you can, but there's certain things you have to, steps you have to follow. With these changes, and buyers coming in, before they can cross that threshold, they've got to sign a buyer
I don't think it's gonna
brokerage.
dissuade buyers from coming into the open house. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get me to sign something on the way out in the door or something.
For those of you wanting to hold open houses or needing agents to hold open houses, it's best to keep it inside these four walls, is my point.
It always has been.
It's best,
Yeah.
you gotta keep it within these four walls.
And of course, the question I've asked several times, I said, but we are 5 different franchises. We've got one broker of record.
You got what?
I think if you have one broker of record, you can make the argument,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
That's the reason I changed it from the city side to city. Right.
So you're under the Rawls group and you have another, 2 different offices, you're saying we might be okay?
We might.
We might, because he said don't get too close to the
I think
edge.
because, and guys, if you think there's absolutes, the reason I have that is that if Angela goes out there and cusses out a buyer that walks in the front door, that buyer wants to be able to call the number on that sign, get me and say, let me tell about Angela how awful she is. That's the purpose of it. How many of the phone calls I've had in 40 years?
What'd you say?
I've had one phone call in 40 years. Well, what I'm saying is that the purpose of that is that if a buyer walks in your open house and y'all have a discussion, that buyer needs to be able to look on the sign, call that number and say, I was just there and your agent, Billy Smith, was awful, I want to report him. So that they won't be able to get to me, actually, share. I said, share, okay, yes, ma'am.
What's the form that would need to be signed?
It would be,
No, you said something would have to be done between the agents.
Oh,
It's on our Fawn resource page, just permissions, and you gotta have double sign it, it's a lot of stuff.
it's both brokers signing off on the fact that you've got an agent who's doing work for a property that's not under their brokerage.
I just say keep it simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all on our Fawn resource page, it's like 2 or 3 forms that need to be signed.
Guys, just remember that the sky's not falling. The sky's not falling. She's an attorney. She's compliant. They want you to do everything exactly above letter law. Like, you should not be writing special stipulations by yourself. You should not be doing it. You should not, that's illegal. How many of you write special tips all the time? Everybody thinks you're that's illegal, you should not be doing that. You should have the sheriff on for you.
No, she'd be using the car special.
The real estate police drive around in a yellow Yugo.
Who in here remembers testers? Remember testers?
Remember them, they haven't gone away.
Well, do you remember them now? Exactly right. All right, got anything else we need to talk about? Thank you all for your attention, and thanks for coming, and guys, I hope you learned a lot. Enjoy your day.